Assalamu alaikum. We are going to start with formula writing of compounds and of equations. So firstly, for any simple element, we know that to write its formula, we can just use the symbol. For example, for sodium, we can simply write Na. But then, what if we want to write the formula for sodium chloride? Then what we will do, the first thing we do is that since this compound has been formed by a cation and an anion, we are going to write those cations and anions. So the cation would be Na plus because sodium has a +1 charge, and the anion would be Cl minus because chlorine has a -1 charge. What happens? It's very simple. The positive and negative charges get cancelled, and so all that is left is NaCl or sodium chloride. That is very simple. But say we have a little more difficult compound. For example, copper 2 chloride. For that, you will once again write both the ions, Cu2 plus and Cl minus, and then you're just going to cross multiply the two charges. So the 2 will go towards chlorine and the -1 will go towards copper. And since we do not write the 1 charge, so we're just going to write Cu as Cu, and that 2 will be carried over to chlorine and it becomes CuCl2. Let's take one last example and then we'll move to balancing of equations. We want to write the formula for tin sulfate, tin 2 sulfate. We know then that tin will have a charge of +2 because it's tin 2. So the symbol for tin is Sn, charges 2 plus, sulfate SO4 2 minus, charges get cancelled, SnSO4. That is the formula for tin sulfate. That's it for formula writing of compounds. Now let's move on to balancing of equations. So the easiest equation we'll take is K potassium plus chlorine forms potassium chloride. Now we know how are we getting this potassium chloride? K plus Cl minus, same charges get cancelled, KCl. What do I mean by balancing it? I mean that there should be the same number of potassiums and chlorines on both sides. So over here at the moment, I have 1 potassium on the left hand side and 1 potassium on the right hand side, 2 chlorine on the left hand side and 1 chlorine on the right hand side. Potassium is balanced but the chlorine is not balanced. So firstly, to make this chlorine 2 on the right hand side, I can add a 2 over here. This becomes 2 KCl. So now what happens is that the potassium on the right hand side becomes 2 and the chlorine on the right hand side becomes 2. So the potassium on the left hand side becomes unbalanced. So I can just add another 2 over here. And so I get 2K. So the potassium on the left hand side also becomes 2. And now it's balanced. I have 2 potassium atoms on the left hand side, 2 potassium atoms on the right hand side, 2 chlorine atoms on the left hand side and 2 chlorine atoms on the right hand side. This 2 over here with KCl is being multiplied by both potassium and by chlorine. So it means this is 2K and 2Cl. There are 2 potassium atoms and 2 chlorine atoms. Let's take a more difficult example. So the example we have is methane plus oxygen forms carbon dioxide plus water. This balancing of equations will always be done through trial and error, and you need to keep doing that with a pencil, and it's best if you make this small table at the bottom that keeps track of the atoms that are present. So let's see, how many carbons do we have on the left hand side? 1. How many carbons do we have at the right hand side? 1. How many hydrogens? 4. 2. How many oxygen? 2 on the left hand side, as you can see, and 1, 2 plus 3 over here. So we have 3 oxygen atoms at the right hand side. To balance hydrogen first, let's add a 2 over here. But then that 2 will also multiply with the oxygen along with the hydrogen. So what happens is that firstly, the hydrogen becomes 4, but the oxygen is disturbed, and the oxygen on the right hand side becomes 6. I'm sorry, 4. Because 2 over here and 2 with carbon dioxide. So then what happens? Let's try to balance the oxygen. Let's just add a 2 over here. That becomes 4. 2 times 2 oxygen atoms makes it 4 oxygen atoms. So this becomes 4, and my equation is balanced. The equation we're now balancing is NH3 plus H2SO4, giving me NH4 taken twice SO4. Let's discuss how we got that. NH4 has a charge of 1 positive. SO4 has a charge of 2 minus. We cross multiply the two charges. And so we get NH4. Since that 2 has to be multiplied with the whole of ammonium, so it becomes NH4 taken twice. We use brackets and SO4. Okay, let's see. We have 1 nitrogen on the left hand side, 2 on the right hand side, because this 2 is being multiplied with both the atoms. We have 3 plus 2, 5 hydrogens over here, and 4 times 2, 8 hydrogens on the right hand side. Then we have 1 sulfate atom on both sides, and we have 4 oxygen here, 4 oxygen there. We have all these 4 atoms. So what are the 2 disbalanced atoms? Nitrogen and hydrogen. What do we do for them? For nitrogen, it's 1 on the left hand side. Let's multiply it by 2. So 2 NH3. When we do that, so this becomes 2, but another thing happens. The hydrogen also changes because you now multiply this 3 by 2, so 6. But we also have this hydrogen here, which is 2. So 6 plus 2 becomes 8. And so these hydrogens become 8 as well. So this whole is balanced. We're taking the last example, and then let's end this video. Now, the example we have is carbon fluoride plus bromine, giving me carbon bromide plus fluorine. Okay, so why have I written fluorine as F2 even though it has a +1 charge? Because it's a halogen, and all gases and a gas, and so all gases will be written in that form, H2O2. However, carbon will be just written as C, F2, etc. So to first balance the equation, How many carbons do you have? 1, 1. How many fluorine do we have? 4 here, 2 there. How many bromine do we have? 2 here, 4 there. On the right. So, carbon is balanced for fluorine. We have 4 on the left hand side. So, we have 2 more. Let's add 2F2. So, that becomes 4 because 2 times 2 gives you 4. But then what about bromine? So to make this 4, this is right now 2. Let's add a 2 here, and that 2 times 2 gives us 4. So this becomes 4 as well, and we have 4 for bromine. This equation is also balanced, and we're done with our topic of formula writing and balancing of equations.